So first, welcome. My name is Mark Van Horn. I'm a director of software engineering at Akamai. I live Property Manager. It is a project that I own for the last couple of years. So anything you love about it is because of me. Anything you don't like is from my predecessor. I can assure you. All right. Let me show you what we're going to cover today. So basically, I want to go through first what is Property Manager API or PAPI. Does everybody here use it? Has everybody tried using it? Okay, good. You're in the right place. Bruce, we'll catch you up. We'll catch you up quick. I'll tell you about some of the features we've just released, and then I want to talk about some of the things we're planning for next year, early next year. And this is really where we need your feedback. There's two things I'll talk about, which is the end stage deployment pipeline or promotional deployment, and then bulk config updates. So these are two things we're in proof of concept sort of mode right now, PowerPoint, some code written, but really trying to zone in on what the requirements are, how to help you guys do your stuff better. First, developer.akamai.com is a place to go for all the documentation on Property Manager API. So I'm sure most of you have been here. Just a refresher, this is where you would go to find out what you can do. And the features I talk about today, I believe are already documented on that site. Okay, first, we'll talk about what can we do today. Variables is a big feature we released earlier this year. I think there's still a lot of confusion over what they can do, the power that variables can bring. This basically allows you to make variable assignments and dereferences in your configuration. And these can be both based on logic that you're providing and also variables that we provide, Akamai can provide. Jay Sicklin wrote a great community post called Using Property Manager Variables. It is awesome. Jay's sitting right here. Jay, you want to raise your hand if anybody has questions? He's the guy to go to. I'd highly recommend if you want to use variables, this is a great reference document. I'll walk through one use case, and I know this is the UI and we're talking about the API, but it just is a lot easier for me to explain it using the UI. And I'll show you like a little JSON snippet at the end to prove that, yeah, this is actually in the code as well. All right, so here's an example. You set up some variables. These are user variables that you would set up, and here's an example of a little table of, we have region and then language. We're going to use that later in this example, just to do a redirect. Okay? So we've set up this CT variable, and you can see here we can extract, we could set it, we're setting it here, extracting Edgescape data, specifically the country code. So this would be a way to set that variable in your configuration. You can also use built-in variables. In this case, we're going to take this PM user URL variable that we set up, and we're going to get the built-in AKURL variable. We're going to get one of the parts of that URL that was typed in. So this is now you're taking the incoming request. Okay, finally, we're going to do an extraction of this list, this table. We're going to extract a parameter based on this CT variable, and then the separator is the tilde. You can see where this is going. All right. So finally, how would you use all that? Well, now you can actually dereference that variable that you set in a configuration redirect. So here, these little curlies that we have come on as a convention, you can use to dereference the variable string, and in this case, send a redirect. So this is just a quick example. This is actually documented fully in Jay's community post. I skipped all the part about setting up default values, and you can read his nice post and get all that. This is available today. A lot of customers are using it with success, so I would definitely recommend you can check this out. In many cases, it reduces metadata because you're going to use variables now to do some work instead of having copies of rules or matches throughout the config. All right, I mentioned this before. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm used to it all the time. So if you have any questions, please. I don't believe that's present today. I think the person directly sitting in front of you and to the left is the right person to convince that's a great idea. Thank you for the question, though. Okay, and this is, I promised you to show, this is actually in the JSON representation of that configuration. There's a block of JSON that's called variables, and this is where they would go. So if you're doing this as code, which we would encourage you to do, this is how you would use that setting in the API to post or put this data back to Akamai for a configuration. So, a common example would be you have a new region, you have a new localization. If this is a variable, you could just add to the end a little tilde and then your next tuple, and then put that up through Property Manager API. It's all done as code on your site in your IDE environment you don't have to look at the UI for Property Manager at all. OK, last week, leading up to this conference, we released a few ease of use enhancements. Again, these are live today. I just want to walk through them. Quick setup. If you're using Property Manager API, you would go to the GitHub, which is Akamai, github.com/Akamai, and you pick up one of our auth clients to make the connections. In these examples I'll show you, I'm using the Python client. I really like in Jupyter these days. That's what like all my example screenshots will be out of Jupyter. Once you have that library downloaded, it's the EdgeGrid auth library. Here's your simple, in this case for Python, just import statements. And then at the start of it, this is where you're using this EdgeGrid auth library. Don't take screenshots. This is not my real password and token. I've obviously blanked these out, but this is where you would put your connection data for the authorization. OK, now I'll go through 3 features we just released. These are a little deep. I'll make sure we spend a little bit of time on each one. This is a real content, guys. There's no polish here on slides. I actually do a job every day. So this is all I can get done. So here we have client settings. I'm showing you here about data prefixes. So in the past, you guys may have known to use Property Manager, we added these string prefixes on all of the variables. This is our version 1 idea. It turns out it was not so usable. So for contract, you'd be like CTR underscore and then the contract. For CP code, it was CP underscore and the CP code. A lot of you guys said, you know what, this is a little kludgy. I can't take data from one API and pass it into another with these prefixes. So now we give you the ability to make these prefixes optional. You can do that through the settings, client settings endpoint, if you want it applied to your whole account transaction. So the way you would do that here is you can see I'm putting here use prefixes false. And then this is that 200 comes back and says, OK, now the setting is false. We defaulted it to true, so none of the client code you've written will break. It's defaulting to true, which it is today, so nothing will break. On the input, it's all optional. And then on the output is basically what you're setting here. You'll see now I'm doing groups. I'm just getting the groups in this particular account. And you can see that the group ID is going to have a GRP prefix. The account ID doesn't have an ACT prefix. It's just the straight data. Again, it's optional. When you guys are redoing your clients, you want to integrate this feature, feel free to go ahead. Optionally, and this is documented on the developer site, you could use a header to set this preference. So if on every request or certain requests you don't want the prefixes, you can use a header to say no prefixes on this request. Okay? Second, we realized on many of the URLs that we were asking for, we're requiring contract and group ID. And that doesn't always make sense because if you're giving us a property ID, we know we could figure out what the group and the contract are. So for those URLs, we've now made them optional. So in this get now, you see I'm getting this property and it has a property ID, again, no prefix, which is kind of nice. And then it just comes back as it would today if you had the contract and the group ID appended. So again, a small ease of use enhancement, but it should clean up a lot of your code. You don't have to fetch the group and the contract every single time. Now you could just use the property ID in those gets. Finally, a big request, feature request came for multi-developer support. So we had a lot of developers working, say, on one config. And they're all making changes and saving, which we required you to save to validate. So now we've released a new feature. You can validate without saving. So using these new URL parameters on the put call, you say dry run equals true. And then you could optionally say validate mode equals fast or full, and it defaults to full. And basically what you're seeing here, this demo doesn't really work in this context because I can't prove that the database didn't take the update. But you get the idea. So here you can see I've added now dry run true, validate mode fast. And then this again is on a put. And what it's done is to actually take the property in that you've sent, the JSON, done a validation, pass on it, return to you any errors or warnings, but it hasn't persisted anything to the database. So if you have a lot of developers making changes, they could do this idempotently without changing any data. And then when everything checks out, there's no warnings, no errors, then you can finally do a put with the true save. All right? I'm moving fast, guys. Hopefully this is OK. All right. Custom behaviors is another new feature that is coming soon, like in weeks. So we have this working in production today for a set of customers. It's working well. We just have a few finishing touches to put on it based on that feedback. And then you will have custom behaviors in Property Manager for approved metadata chunks. Many customers today, probably many of you guys, have advanced metadata in your configurations that were set up by an internal Akamai employee, PS employee. These are not reusable across your configs. Often you want them to be. So we've developed a process by which our internal GSS professionals can approve metadata, advanced metadata, for reuse. And this then becomes a custom behavior. Through the API or the UI then, you'd be able to get the custom behaviors that are on your account, and these are account level custom behaviors. And then you'll be able to freely reuse them in configurations. It won't generate any errors when you try to save or activate that config. All right, so this does require you to work with your account teams to get these approvals in and done. And then it will just become another behavior on your property that you can assign and use freely. Yes, yes. So there is a case, of course, like if there could be a variable dereference in here, like let's say something is said above. If you apply that and the variable is not yet defined, it will generate an error on the config. You just then go and add the variable declaration and set it, and it would work. Yeah.
The example right there.
Oh yeah, right there. Yeah. Yep. Good question. Yeah, we hope this adds a lot more flexibility to the self-service, especially as we're talking about DevOps. You need to create a lot of environments, a lot of dev configs. Then this way they would be able to include the advanced metadata. Yes? You can today, but you can't edit it. And in this case, you also cannot edit the advanced metadata. What you could not do is apply that advanced metadata to a new configuration version of a different config, right? So let's say you have your configuration with advanced metadata that's very happily activating, but you want to create another copy of that for, say, a dev environment. You can't put the advanced metadata into that configuration until you get this approval, right? Okay, we're really excited about this. There's a nice lab outside in the dev zone that goes through custom behaviors. Is kind of nice. Okay, I want to talk a little bit quickly about frozen formats. So this is going like deep into the PAPI bowels, but it's important to note. So we have a catalog that defines the features and behaviors and matches that you can put into a configuration. We recommend you use a frozen format. So we freeze this. We're trying to freeze it about every 6 months. Okay, in this way, when we make changes or updates to the catalog, it doesn't impact your clients, your PAPI clients, because you're on a frozen version that's not moving. Okay, now this will require you at some point to upgrade because we're releasing a lot of functionality, we're releasing new behaviors that you won't have access to, but you can do it in a planned way. So hopefully once a year, you're going in there, taking the new version of the catalog, and then using that in your property. Now we expect when you do that for the first time, you're going to see some errors and warnings you hadn't seen before, because there's new features and new behaviors that are added. You would want to do that in a planned way. So this is a very busy slide, but I'm going to walk through basically what we're seeing. First, there's an endpoint in PAPI to get the rule formats, and this is today, actually. So you can see that there's a version we have from 2017, 2016, 2015, and then latest. So you could take latest as the version, but it just means that when we make changes, you might have to make changes too to your client code. That might not be the best thing for your business. So we would always recommend you take the latest frozen format, and we version them by date. By default, if you don't supply a version, when you create a new property manager config, it will pick for you the latest frozen version. So you can get that. That's what's happening today. Here's an example where I've created now a property with this post to the proper endpoint, and it comes back this property link, and if I go fetch that property, you'll see that the rule format, I think I've highlighted there, yeah. So the rule format is defaulting to the latest frozen version, okay? So again, it's just a quick word. Take the default, latest frozen version, but you should plan maybe once a year to upgrade to the next latest one. Okay, that's all stuff that's out there today. You can use it right now. If you're super excited, you could go into the dev zone and start playing around with some of this stuff. I want to talk about next, make a shift into what we're thinking about for next year. Okay, so we're working on 2 big pieces of functionality for Property Manager to support DevOps. Hopefully, in the beginning, first half of next year, we want some of this stuff to see the light of day. And this is where we need your help, trying to help us drive the direction. You might have seen this slide earlier. This was up on the main stage for a little while for a few presentations. But basically, in the top swim lane, which is the automation, these 2 projects cover the 2 boxes I've circled. So first is to automate propagating changes between different environments. That's what we call our deployment pipeline or end-stage deployment pipeline. And the second is bulk updates. How do we make the same change across hundreds of configs? OK, I'll cover each one in turn. First, we'll talk about the deployment pipeline. Here's a simple use case. And our idea right now is instead of giving like another API, more endpoints, we want to give you guys an SDK to download and use locally. This SDK would then wrap the APIs. So basically, you could look at it and see what it's doing, but it's going to wrap the APIs and provide a little bit of guardrails and business logic to enforce your environmental structure. This is a nice graphical representation of what how we're thinking this may work. You'll edit the configuration in your source control system. Iterate until you're ready to deploy it to dev, and then this would be Akamai Ghost deployment. When you're happy with that, you promote it to QA. Through one command, like a promotion command, and then test in QA. So this again is a second Akamai configuration pushed out to Ghost. And then finally, when you're happy with that, you run a promotion command and it goes into prod. This is 3. We're not saying it has to be 3 or 2 or 5. We'll let you pick how many stages you want in your pipeline. OK. This is more logical representation of what we're thinking. These boxes in blue are what you would edit in your source control system and IDEs. So what we want to do is take a template file that would be JSON. This would be the rule tree. But it would have references to variables. Those variables then would be the things that change from your environments. So it may be like a CP code, TTL, origin hostname. You get to decide what's changing from environment to environment. And then there's a dictionary of those variables. Okay. One of my developers actually has this thing kind of working on their laptop, so I asked him to grab a bunch of screenshots just to show you what we're thinking, like how this may actually work. So first, you create a project with the in this case, we said Ion, and there's 4 stages to this pipeline. And now part of what we want to do is like strictly enforce this promotion model. So you go from like dev to QA to staging production in this case. Right? And we'll help you. We'll provide the tools to help do that. Then you run a npm command. In this case, again, we're still playing around with the proof of concept. And it will get all the libraries and things that you need and set up this folder structure for you. So you can see important here, like you have a folder per environment. And then you have these variable definitions, and you have these templates. We'll go through each of these. But basically, we'll use this toolkit, this SDK, to set all this stuff up for you. And then you could access it with your IDE and start making edits, changes, source control, all that good stuff on site. This is an example just of what we're thinking for variable definition. So in this pipeline example, there's 3 or 4 things, rather, that we're going to change: hostname, TTL, and CP code per environment. And then they have defaults. So these would be the elements that are going to change as you're moving that configuration through the pipeline. It could be anything. I mean, it's really going to be dependent on your site and your specific pipeline. OK. We'll have a variables file, a settings file, and a hostnames file. In this case, those 3 things that we're changing, in this case, is the dev environment. So we're saying the dev CP code is this, default TTL is this, et cetera. So we're going to templatize these different variables in the environments. We also want to give you the ability, so in this case, like your configuration could have other includes that are all be local. So we think this might be an easier way just to describe the config. You don't have to have this monster JSON block. You can have these includes. And then part of that would be this variable dereference. So before we said, OK, the CP code is going to change from environment to environment, and this is how you would represent that in the single JSON file, the single rule file that is going to be submitted to this pipeline. So again, I'm just showing now the include for origin, has this origin variable, TTL variable, et cetera. And this should look like normal PAPI JSON if you're familiar with that format, because it is. OK, finally, you do like a merge command. So this is going to bring the variables together with the template to create the single config that Akamai will submit. But it's all transparent to you. OK, it's telling you what it's doing, and then it actually writes this file in a dist folder. But basically, you can see the substitutions that are occurring. One command, merge dev. OK. We also want to give you the validation library locally. So you don't need to call into Akamai to validate the config. So a lot of validation we do with JavaScript today. There's no reason why we can't distribute that out and have it work locally. There's other checks that occur on the server, which of course we'll still do. But this will allow you to run the validation very quickly, locally, in this case, using an npm command. Right, once it validates everything's OK, now we can try promoting it. And I just showed this example. Well, we tried to go to QA first, and it's going to tell you, cannot promote. You got to go to dev first. So we were thinking about giving you guys some strict enforcement over the pipeline phases. Okay, so let's go promote to dev. So in this case, it's going to do this merge again, boom, 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 and then it's going to go activate, all with one command. So this could be part of your Jenkins build success output. You could run it from a command line, but it would do all this for you, merging the variables. And now you're guaranteed that you have one JSON representation of the config. The variables have been interpolated in, and now you can push that from dev to QA to a production environment. It's the same config. Yeah, it's a good question. And you're talking about incoming host header, basically the digital property. Yeah, I think we haven't quite thought about what safety checks we would want to apply to this kind of a pipeline, but I think what you just suggested would be a good one for us to think about. Yeah, certainly we want to provide, now there are customers today that I've spoken with that are doing this already locally with their own code repos and their own kind of scripting and glue. I think what we're suggesting is that we could provide that functionality for you out of the box with appropriate guardrails and checks and safeties and things like this. So I think nothing exists yet that we can actually give you, but when it does, we will provide a lot, as many safeties as we think are important. And that's a great one that you suggest. Okay, I want to move on now to bulk updates of the configurations that we're thinking, or templates 2.0. Does anybody have any other questions about the previous stuff before we move on? All right, let's do it. Perfect timing. All right. So today we have templates 1.0, or we just call them user templates. I like to think about these like a macro. So you're defining a set of rules, you're saving them at your account level, and then you can apply them to a configuration. And really what it's doing is taking that stored rule tree or behavior, whatever you have saved, and it's putting it into your configuration like a macro. So it's like you would have gone in and just typed it yourself. There's no direct association after that is done. So after you put the template in, and this is great functionality, it's available today, it will expand all those rules and features and behaviors, and then you can use that going forward in the config. If you make an edit, you can, nothing goes back the other direction. And this is what rule templates 1.0 are. We realize that there's more functionality that we could provide when we're calling them rule templates 2.0, really make these a first-class referenceable citizen, and then maintain that reference between the configuration that is implemented the rule template and the rule template itself. And this would then allow us to get updates cascaded into configurations. And this is the way we're thinking about bulk updates. So if you had a lot of configurations where you all had the same origin defined as a template, for example, you could change the template and then through a series of simple commands, get all of those properties updated with the same information from that rule template 2.0. All right, I'll go into some more examples of that. Basically, a simple workflow would be you edit the template. You can find all the properties that use it. You would then bulk save those and then bulk activate. So this is a new functionality that we want to provide. I got one thumbs up. I like that. All right. Yeah, I think we heard the market need, and we're listening to you guys now. I'll just walk through a quick example of those steps, how this may work in the real world. Again, this is all stuff we're proof of concepts right now, some little bit of code built, but really this is what we're looking to do for next year. Okay. Step one, modify the template. So here's like rule include one. We're changing the gzip response now to always. So you'd run our API and it would be saved on the server. So this is a first-class citizen, first-class object that we would have in Property Manager, new endpoints for these types of things. Okay, now optionally, if you forgot which configurations use this thing, we provide a search endpoint to say, give me all the configurations that use this rule template. So then you say, okay, rule include 1, run the search. Here's the list of configurations and versions that use this. Okay. Now you decided that you've made that change to the template, and now you want to apply it to either all of those configs or a subset of the configs that have it. So through one command, we would let you create new versions of those and save those configurations. So here I'm just passing in these two configs with the current version, and then boom, you get new versions created of those configurations. One command. Step 3, validate. So now you've created these new versions of the command. We're going to run this command as a save and validate, again, on a list of configurations. It would squeeze together the template, the new updated template plus the config, and it would then run validation on them all asynchronously. So we give you an endpoint, you can check it for status. Okay. Final step, once that's done, hopefully you don't see many fails, but it could happen. Your validation could fail. Activate. One step, one command, take all those configs that are now merged together with the template, the updates have been applied. Now you could activate them all with one asynchronous call. So in this way, in this example with the gzip response, we've applied that change to the template once, and then created a new version, activated all the configurations that use that template. They all got the same update at the same time. Yes? We're still thinking about if we want to version the templates. We've provided the capability for doing that, and we're wondering if it's useful or too confusing. So the configurations themselves need to be upgraded. They need to be bumped. The live version of the config that's in Ghost has the old template, right? If you want to apply a change that you've made, in this case, like making this behavior, you need to get a new version of the live config. The templates themselves, we haven't decided yet. We haven't landed yet on do we want to version the templates. Or if you need to make a change, you just create a new template. But right now, we're versioning them. So you make a change to this template. Go forward.
But when you apply template to a property, currently in Linux, you can still go in and manually edit the copy.
Right. So in
the new 2.0, if somebody goes in, either the PAPI or whatever, and manually edits the displaced template, it's no longer part of that template.
Yep. So we're thinking that it would not be editable unless you strictly broke the connection.
Okay.
So in other words, it would render, this is our current thought, it would render as an uneditable block of metadata with the reference to the template. Hey, this is template 1. And you could break that connection and say, I want to just make this regular metadata. And then the association would break. It would not get the benefit of future updates. Yeah, no problem. Okay. Oops. Activate, activate. So then again, we know this new endpoint would be able to activate them all at once. All right. Awesome, I'm right on time. We've created this QR code for survey feedback on this session. We're very keen to, you could type it in as well if you don't want to take a picture. But basically, we're very keen to know if we're on the right track. All right, I think I've talked to a lot of you out at the booth, and I'll be there for the rest of today in the dev zone. If you have any thoughts or feedback, I'd love to hear about it. This is another way to get us information, is through this survey. Right. Thanks, everybody. Any other questions or comments before we go? I know, that's all right. I'm used to it, Jay. I never get applause. Yes? Actually, so Sid, the gentleman in the back, has been asking us that very same question. Yeah. Yeah, I can say in a very real way, we have engineers working on this functionality now. We're still trying to hone in on what should the requirements be for that first release, and we're targeting next year, early next year. This was written with NPM, as you saw. I think that's our kind of default right now, but we're not stuck. We're so early in the process, we're not stuck on anything specific. Yeah. Yeah, goes pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know if we've considered that one yet, but it's an interesting one. Actually, you chat with that gentleman, Sid, if you want to raise your hand in the back. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of your conference.